Hey, you're watching Knife YouTube, so you are probably a knife enthusiast. And something that knife enthusiasts really want, more than a lot of other things, is to share our enthusiasm around. We want to buy people knives, and we want to buy people who aren't knife people knives. And this isn't as easy as it seems. You just think if you get them the best one, then they will be instantly swayed, but it's not the case. So this video is kind of about some things that you may not have thought about. If you're thinking of buying a person in your life who doesn't outwardly seem to be at all interested in knives, the right knife to hopefully get them at least carrying that one, and maybe even carrying a whole bunch more. Spread the sickness. So I know that every Christmas time, if I wasn't restrained by my wife, I would buy everyone in my family a knife that I have perceived to meet their specific needs in a very tailored way. Look, this video is for people a bit like me, which may be someone like you, and it has a good bit of general advice, I think. Things to remember, and this is really basic stuff. And yeah, I'll make a few recommendations along the way of some good places to start. But firstly, you want the person you are buying the knife for to actually carry and use the knife. Now, I've bought knives for a lot of people, and I noticed about a 50% stick rate. So the rest, I assume, end up in junk drawers or car glove boxes or whatever. So about half of them I actually see in the pocket, or the person actually brings up later on that they're enjoying carrying that knife. So what attributes of the knife would make it seem too hard for the receiver to continue using that knife? Like what makes those 50% cease using the knife, almost immediately, or even never try it? So I try and reverse engineer this problem and think of times where I just haven't merged with something. A good example I can think of is, when you need to use another person's phone. Like it's going to be either an Android if you're an iPhone person, or an iPhone if you're an Android person, or whatever else in between. And you quickly resolve, after some helpless mashing of buttons and swiping of menus that you don't understand, to pretty much never use this brand of phone again. It's that first experience and that first few minutes with something, whether it's intuitive or not to you, is often what sways whether you, subconsciously or not, like this thing. So with a knife, I think the equivalent to that is the locking and deployment. So if a person's few minutes with a knife is a feeling of awkwardness and having to be shown several times how to deal with the simple procedure of them opening and closing their knife, I think it's going to leave them in a bad space to jump into the hobby from there on in. They're probably just going to, in those first impressions, put it in the too hard basket. They'll smile and say, "Oh yeah, I get it now," but they may not get it. They felt that awkwardness of, when it's like when you've misheard someone 3 or 4 times, and in the end you just go, "Wow, yeah, great," and then just hope they don't ask you at all a follow-up question. It's a bit like that. So us knife guys, let's keep using that phone analogy, I suppose. We're like the guys who are in that little shop in the middle of the arcade with all those broken phones and all taking apart screens and rejigging things at a massively fast rate. We are all over it, and we can navigate all of them with pretty decent ease, no matter what the brand is, unless something really curveball comes towards us. So we don't really get, or we forget, that to an uninitiated user who maybe has used a couple of Swiss Army knives or little keychain knives in their whole life, all but the most basic locks are going to initially hinder that gift and leave that weird or uncomfortable, or, if your tool makes you feel silly when you first deal with it, you're probably just going to form a subconscious bias towards it. So I'm going to draw some size here probably. But I would say that if you're buying for someone with no previous knife experience at all, you're going to want to stop at either a lockback knife, or, oddly enough, and this is a bit more of an advanced thing, a push button knife, like a button lock knife. Whether it's an auto or not, I don't know, probably just a push button. So something like, say, the CRKT deadbolt, that kind of lock. Maybe there's a Hogue button locking flipper. There's a few of them around, but I would go, if they're a bit more rare or expensive, a back lock is what you're going to do. It's simplicity. It's doing the one thing that you're familiar with that is just a simple mechanical process. Both the button and the back lock are pretty much just pushing a button of sorts, and people get that instantly. You push the button, very tactile, the knife releases. I would stick with something pretty simple like a thumb stud or a thumb hole as an opening mechanism. Again, as much as we love flippers and flipping them open, think about it. If it's a flipper, so say, what's a great flipper? What have I got here? Here we go, a Kershaw fraction. So to me, this is really easy. but I guarantee you I hand this to like my sister who isn't into knives. She may eventually get it open. This is a simulation. And then she will hand it back to me for me to close. And that little exchange probably puts her in the mindset of, well, that knife made me feel silly, so therefore I don't want it. So your knife, beneficiary, they may get there with their second purchase. This may be in their future, but for the now, stick to something that's quality and simple, a back lock that they're going to be able to work out. The only other lock I'm sort of in a middle ground with is the axis lock. I think you can more or less see this and how it works before you pick it up, but then this may even be my knife nerd bias coming through and just thinking, well, this is so simple to me, it's going to be simple to everyone. And this is probably what I'm trying to warn against. So possibly the axis lock may be a substitution if you're really bored by backlocks. But remember, you may be bored by backlocks. I guarantee your brand new knife person isn't at all. So second thing you want to keep the knife in the person's pocket, or you want to make it a usable, instantly gratifying tool for them, is it's going to want to be nice to carry and the furthest thing from being a pain in the ass at all. So just think about it. Everyone has an EDC, right? So some people, like even non-knife people, it's going to be like a watch, it's going to be a few things in their handbag, it's going to be a wallet, it's going to be a phone. So everyone's got an EDC. That isn't just geek talk or geek talk at all. Everyone has one in some way or another, no matter how simple it is. So we all start at a baseline, which is, a few things that everyone uses. So to try and, I guess, get my point across, every now and then my EDC, which is good, it has the knife and the torch, the extra gear nerd stuff in it, every now and then I'll say to myself, well, I might try and incorporate something new into it. It might be a handkerchief or a lighter or a little pill capsule or a bottle opener, and you'll see in my videos, I've done this from time to time, and unless they are absolutely intuitive and absolutely bring nothing but extra to my loadout, they eventually do go away. So say a handkerchief, it's a really, really handy, undeniably a handy thing to have, but I keep it in my back pocket, I keep it in the same pocket as my wallet maybe, I pull out my handkerchief, my wallet falls out. That happens a few times, I'm over it. So we need to think, what about knives can stop people from, you can put them in the same box as that handkerchief experience of mine. So we need to make our knives as easy to carry as possible. So how do we fix this? We choose something that is unobtrusive, something slim, light, with a good pocket clip that doesn't hang up. Something that you don't need to be a knife nut already to have to see past or even do a little modification on. As simple as it seems to us. Oh, just sand back that G10. It's a good example, say this Viper knife here, this Viper Boulogne. A knife that really does tick a lot of my personal boxes. However, the clip, to me, it's an annoyance because it hangs up on this screw. I've learned to deal with it, so I don't hate the knife because of the clip, but to someone, if this was their first knife, this would just be, even if they don't make a resolute decision about it, it would just be probably what put them off this and hey, maybe any knives for a little while if this was their first experience. It is not, it's not ideal, but I think it is human nature. It is how it is. Another thing is, the Cold Steel, the Recon G10. This American Lawman G10 is not as bad. The clip is very, very firm even still. But the Recon G10, for example, a lot of end users take off the clip and sand away the bit of G10 because even for them, it's kind of difficult to get out of their pants. It's things like that otherwise make a lot of Cold Steel knives brilliant first knives. And they are if someone is willing to look past that or deal with that. But these are the people I'm dealing with right now, though, are the ones who you absolutely need to really convince or really, you need to make it an effortless thing for them to carry the knife. So you go with something light that has an easy and a proven pocket clip. And I'll get some good examples out for you on the table now. So other factors notwithstanding, these are some great examples of good pocket clips that are nice and carryable that really aren't going to cause people too many problems. They've all got enough lip to be able to easily slide in. The knives themselves are quite lightweight and have a fairly small footprint. This is of course the carbon fiber pilar, in case you're wondering if you're a knife guy. They make a quite heavier version of this in steel on both sides. But so these are four really great pocket clips, and another one that I really like is the Spyderco wire clip as well. Just pretty effortless, no real issue, and if they ever was going to be an issue, Spyderco you'll often find have their smoothed out emblem underneath the clip part. None of these knives here, at any point would you think, this is driving me crazy having this in my pocket, or getting it out or putting it back into my pocket. Okay, so you've hopefully chosen something effortless to open and close, and now something that's really low maintenance and low issue to carry. So most knives that are sold as knives are going to cut well enough to be a non-knife person, keyword, non-knife person's first knife, and do all their basic jobs well enough, absolutely. They can delve into thickness behind the edge and absolute cutting geometry in their later purchases, and they can get into that if they want to get into that. Fact of the matter is, I've given CRKT Pilars to people, and this is quite a thick, chunky little knife blade that isn't my ideal edge as a knife nerd, but the person who I gave it to seems to love it. So that's fine. They can worry about all that stuff later. So we're going to step back. The three most important things about a knife blade, probably in this order, are, in terms of cutting, is geometry first, heat treat second, and then steel third. Look, the geometry and the heat treat, as I said, a knife that you've bought from a competent knife company is probably going to be fine enough on those attributes. So the thing you can actually choose from, quite an easy point of view, because it's labeled on the knife, is the type of steel. So you're thinking, you've got a person you've given a knife to, and it's been going okay with them. They've actually been using it and carrying it a couple of weeks now because of those first couple of things have checked off, and it's simple and it's not a problem for them to carry. So what's going to be the next thing that could possibly stop them? That's right, it's going to be, my knife's now dull, and I'm not in any way skilled at sharpening it, so I'm just going to stop carrying it now. And that's a tricky stage of knife ownership to avert in a new knife owner. But it can be mitigated somewhat by steel choice. So I'd suggest with regard to steel that the most comfortable and often rhetoric that a good cheap knife, such as this or this, that a good cheap knife is a great starting point. And I think that may not be totally spot on. In fact, a good cheap knife like this Kershaw Fraction or the LCK here, it's going to dull pretty easily for the new owner. And that's, if they're actually carrying and using it, which you hope that they are. So these, I think, are actually better for slightly more established knife fans. And these are good for either just scratching a purchasing itch, or using for a job that's certain to damage or wreck a more valuable knife maybe, or maybe just experimenting with different designers and mechanisms and such. The softer steel of the lower cost knives is going to reveal a bit of a sharpening hurdle to them. Because remember, these are very new knife owners we're thinking of. They may eventually learn to sharpen, but what's more likely to happen is that they'll wait till they see you next and have you do it. And unless you're in this person's back pocket, I would be aiming for something well regarded as like a mid-tier steel. So, in case you don't see them for a month or so, it might only just be running out of edge just then. Alrighty, so steels in this bracket here, I think are pretty safe choices, and none of these will drive the price too high up just in terms of the basic steel cost. So you've got VG10, probably the lowest of these in terms of edge retention out of box and even with a more specific edge on, but still a just fine starting point. Probably wouldn't want to go much lower than this for someone who has no sharpening skill at all. And remember, as I said, none at all. So you say, 8 CR is easy to sharpen. It is, if you have any concept of sharpening. Then you move up to D2 and 154 cm. Both of these will hold about the same amount of time in my experience, depending on a few things, but roughly we're talking about the same. And then moving up to some good sort of mid-level powder steels, you got your S30V, your CTS XHP, and your S35V. And look, none of these are going to break the bank. In fact, I think of these knives here, the most expensive ones are because they're from designers that charge more rather than for material costs. So I think the cheapest knife out of all of these here, there's the Rat2 and the Rat1 and D2, and actually the Chaparral is cheaper often than an Endura. So it really doesn't affect the price that much, and all these are good buys for a non-knife person's first knife, for sure. So where does this leave us? What's the best knife to buy someone as an utter first timer? Well, I think these ones on the table here out of my collection, and even when I think more broadly, are pretty good options. So trying to accommodate for just general people size as well, I think there's something here for everyone. So you've got, even starting here, the Buck, hideous pocket clip aside, it is functional enough. It's just really damn ugly. But this really does offer that familiarity, has a good steel, it is going to cut very well. It's not the apex of fit and finish and design or anything like that, but it is a good solid knife that is well enough made, that has no major flaws that a non-knife person, remember, is going to pick up. And as I said, the back lock, the thumb stud, makes it an intuitive opener. So it's just causing none of those real sort of initial problems that could put someone off. The Endura, I chose this over, in just the VG10 version, over the other sort of commonly available version, which is the ZDP version. I think the ZDP, the price of that steel, may just put it a bit too far to get someone as an immediate first knife. And that being said, they'll never have to sharpen it, or very rarely have to sharpen it, but when they give it to you, you'll have a bit of a job cut out for you, as I've just come off the heels of sharpening my ZDP Delica, and it isn't super pleasant. But anyway, an Endura in a VG10, or heck, probably even in a ZDP is a really good choice as well, for a larger hand especially. The Cold Steel American Lawman is the other sort of absolute, one that I do recommend to a lot of folks. Slight little thing with the pocket clip, but I think, again, the G10 isn't rough like it is on a lot of the other Cold Steels, and this really does do a lot of your basic jobs in a very unobtrusive way. So just a really good normal knife. However, the best one I think is the Spyderco Chaparral in FRN. So this is a pretty reasonably priced knife. I think these are about $89 US. You get a piece of CTS XHP, you get a nice neutral simple handle, you get the wire clip which rests on the Spyderco Chaparral logo, making for really easy in and out pocket carry. It's very light, and it will really please them initially with its cutting performance, even with its factory edge, which is aided really nicely with some thin stock. So a great EDC knife, and probably the best immediate choice for someone who has never really been into knives before. The back lock is simple enough to open and close, and we're thinking someone this isn't a knife person, they're probably not going to be fidgeting with it all the time, so they're not too fussed if the lock's particularly enjoyable or fidget friendly or anything like that. This is, as I said, a starter point. Look, they can move on to compression lock or some beasties in Rex 45 still later on if they want to. But I'm just saying, in this initial stage, I do think the Chaparral is a really good one. And if they after someone with slightly bigger hands, then the Spyderco Stretch is probably my second choice, just for a knife for anyone. So of course, these are ones I've just had on hand. And I am a bit of a Spyderco fan, so I'm assuming that the occasional odd or hideous appearance of these knives won't turn your recipient off entirely. But I think by sticking to the criteria I've already sort of talked about, which is absolute ease of opening and closing, simplicity of carry, and a decent proven blade steel, I think you're going to get a much higher chance than my existing 50% of continued knife retention in your gift recipient. Just on one final note, I'd also suggest avoiding anything too funky with regard to handle sculpting, because a knife can be a bit like a shoe. Like, everyone's foot fits a slipper fairly well because they're simple, just like everyone's hand fits a Spyderco Endura because it's simple. So I'd just keep something like that in mind as well. I wouldn't go overboard getting the pocket hunting knives that have finger grooves all over them too. So that's probably my last little point, something to steer clear of. So my overall recommendations for someone's first knife, I mean, these three are just so safe. Specifically the Chaparral, it's just such a good buy, and it's XHP steel. It's just got all those things I'm sort of talking about, and I sort of just came to it as I sort of looked over my collection and tried to apply my criteria to it. So there we have it. Basic thing, I guess, to take away is you have to walk before you can run. So starting off with something just basic and simple can often get folks later on in their second or third or 60th knife, trying the obscure Italian thin flippers or the hardcore tactical knives or the buck marksmans with their G&G Hawk strap locks, all that cool stuff. As much as we love them now as established knife nerds, the newer people just aren't quite there yet. So yeah, I just think this hobby, it is best for all of us if it is about inclusion. And if we get as many knives in people's pockets as possible for them to realize that this is just a handy tool that makes my life better. But like with everything, people aren't always just immediately warm to the idea. So I'm hoping that if you go by what I've sort of said and my suggestions, you might be able to get a few knives this next occasion that actually stick around in the pocket for longer than the first day or two. So there we go. What do you think are great knives to get people as first blades? I know I'm a bit of a Spyderco nerd. Some people just can't stand the looks of them. So if you're not, what do you think? What do you think is good for just something that people can just pick up and go with, that sort of makes it nice and simple and therefore a bit more evergreen? Interested to hear from you in the comments below. Stay tuned for more videos. Goodbye.